Good morning and thank you for watching Citizen TV. Welcome back to Daybreak on this 3rd day of December 2018. It's now 3 minutes to 7 o'clock and it's time to review the news, to look at what you need to care about as you begin your day, as you begin your week. And I'm joined by quite a panel today from, I don't know where to start. Let me start from the right. Yes. Member of Parliament for Kitutu Chache, Richard Onyonka, karibu sana.
Thank you.
Nominated MP Professor Jacqueline Adol, that's very important, Professor Jacqueline Adol, karibu sana.
Thank you.
Jem Divo, governance expert, a former magistrate and lawyer, karibu tena.
Asante.
And Didmas Baraza, Member of Parliament for Kimilili, karibuni sana, to talk about what's making headlines, and especially beginning with the papers. First of all, looking at the Standard, on the front page talks about why boarding in schools may end. Of course, they talk about a team set up by the Ministry of Education proposes abolition of boarding in primary school to allow parents to better monitor their children. Of course, these are just some of the developments that are taking place in the education sector, just trying to manage the affairs of students, of learners at schools, even as we expect the Form 1 selection to begin today. As I said earlier, we'll be taking you there as soon as that begins. Of course, at the top there, you will see that leaders urge Kalonzo, Mudavadi and Gideon to unite. This is a 2022 game plan. Politicians accompanying Baringo's senator to Western Region want President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga to play a kingmaker role in 2022 succession politics once alliance is realized. We'll be talking about that, which is on page 2. And still on the front page of the Standard, Raila Party proposes new power structure governance still. ODM roots for a 7-year one-term president, a parliamentary system of government, and new executive positions in its submission to the Building Bridges initiative. So quite a number of political stories making headlines on the Standard. And then on the Daily Nation, Raila Odinga is there captured saying that stop being greedy. Raila castigates members of parliament in clamour for higher parks. The members of parliament who are agitating for higher parks were last week accused of holding President Kenyatta to ransom by refusing to pass a law aimed at ending gender disparities in elective positions. And now the opposition chief is fighting from Kenyatta's corner by calling for legislators insensitive and anti-people. I have 3 members of parliament who will also be talking about that. And then bribery storm of Ruaraka land vote. This is the report that was tabled at the Senate, and then it was defeated. That gave a report on what really transpired in the controversial sale of Ruaraka land that was valued at 3.5 billion shillings. 1.5 billion shillings had already been paid. And I want us to begin from the start. That is on page 1 of the Standard. Of course, there's a story on Raila Party proposing new power structure. The detail coverage is on page 12 of the Standard, talking about expanding executive will boost unity. The opposition party wants more executive positions created to shift attention from presidency, which it says has become a trophy for ethnic competition. And I want to begin from the point that this is not the very first time we're hearing of proposals to have a 1-year term, to have 14 regional governments, because that has been captured on the Standard. And I'm just wondering, we currently have the policy of a president can serve for a 5-year term, renewable once. So that is to mean a maximum of 10 years. If we change that to have just 1 year term, one term of 7 years, how does then that help us to really deal with the core of the work of a president in this country? Richard.
Well, I think my honest observation is that I would have to wait and look at what the details are on the proposal. I think because of our history and because of the issues which have been raised, there's a possibility that the feeling that when a president is elected in Kenya and takes the 10 years, some regions or some areas may feel disenfranchised. Number 2, I don't know what would happen in terms of does that only hold for the presidency? Does it, if we are going for the parliamentary system, will it also affect the position of the prime minister? Is it going to cascade down to the governors, MPs and the MCAs? I mean, there's so much detail that is actually not been disclosed by the ODM side.
Right.
Before we start even commenting on it, I think it would make sense for us to be a little bit patient, look at what they're putting on the table, and look at it. The feeling, though, that I have is that some people may disagree, but for some of us, or for me in particular, I don't see any fear of contradiction if we had a presidential system. I mean a parliamentary system,
right,
given what we have seen that has happened for the last 10 years, ever since President Mwai Kibaki came in and then President Uhuru took over. There is this very strong feeling where a lot of politicians, and indeed some of the people who even were in the negotiations and discussions about the Bomas draft and all the other Kilifi draft and all the drafts that were brought out, that because of our nature as a people and because of our ethnic arrangements and ethnicity that exists in the Kenyan body politic, that there is a need actually to open up the spaces and create situations whereby we can, obviously, it also makes very many people uncomfortable. But I think it's a debate which we should continue having, and it's a discussion that we should not shy away from.
Right. And looking at the report on the Standard, it talks about what Raila Odinga had proposed, I think, during the devolution conference earlier this year, yes, that is of having regional governments, 14 regional governments, as proposed by the Bomas draft, which of course now is history, and creation of regional assemblies comprising all members of county assemblies in each region. So it's sort of to, in their view, to strengthen the aspect of devolution. And I'm just wondering, as we look at the things that we need to change, because the agenda of the Building Bridges initiative was to resolve the situations that we have had historically, does, what do I call this, formation of these regional governments, and of course having a one-term president, which is 7 years, does it move towards ensuring that we achieve that, in your view?
Thank you for having us on this show this morning. If we're going to have a one-term president, I would that it be a ceremonial presidency. Because if we're going to have a one-term president and he's a powerful president, if I know I'm not going to fight for, there's no incumbency, there's no, this is it. Somebody is going to sit there for 7 years and just messes up, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it except wait out his 7-year term. That's one of the things I hope, if they're working out this proposal, that's one of the proposals that goes with the 1-year term, because the power of re-election is something that helps somebody deliver in the first term and have second term as legacy. But if you just have one term, you could just be this one-term terrible president, then we can do nothing about it. But if we have that ceremonial president, but you've got 14 regions with powerful governors, and have what would be counties now become sub-counties with rotational governorships, then you can have inclusivity at that level. Because the presidency will always be one office. No matter how much we want to hype about our ethnic arrangements, we want to have inclusivity, it's only one office. And because it's an elective office, it's always the big tribes who will be able to propel people forward. The others will be unable to marshal the numbers if we continue playing with our tyranny. So maybe having 14 powerful governors with a rotating governorship within a certain number of sub-counties in the county would be more inclusive than always gunning for that one office. Right. So in my opinion, like Honorable Nyonka, Richard has said, it's difficult to know exactly what their mind was, but with the proposals coming up, it's something that we can actually maybe work with. It can be developed.
Mheshimiwa Baraza, they say that they want to reorganize Parliament so that they have 29 members of the Senate, at least 2 per region. That is from the 14 regions, then you have 28, plus the Speaker, you have 29. They also say that they want to reduce the number of constituencies from, or the members of the National Assembly from 349 to 180. Of course, we know the history of why we have 349 members of Parliament today. What are the prospects of really achieving this, even as we try to look at what ails this country?
I think we have a problem in this country, and we seem to be running away from that problem. The problem that we have is that those who are in charge of managing public resources are not allocating the same resources in an equitable manner. They are taking much of their resources to their communities, to those regions where they come from. That's why now they seem to create so many leaders that each and every community is going to be represented. But that's not going to solve the problem. We must strengthen our institutions so that when you are in charge of a particular government department, You are in that department as a Kenyan, not as a Kikuyu or as a lawyer. And you are supposed to discharge your responsibility equally and equitably to all Kenyans, regardless of whether they come from your community or they don't come from your community. And I think we should... I have a problem with this Building Bridges initiative, because this Building Bridges initiative were created by two people, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. And they cannot, therefore, purport to serve, to represent the interests of all the Kenyan people, either impartially or professionally. They are skewed, they incline towards the people who proposed and who formed them. So what I propose, and I think my fellow members of Parliament need to take this very, very seriously. The Parliament must provide a clear roadmap. We are the representatives of the people. This Building Bridges initiative should be expanded, if at all. Their role is to look into these critical issues of changing the constitution, so that we can be able to bring everybody on board. And we must be guided by two things. One, the desire to reduce the wage bill on the shoulders of the Kenyan people, and the two, to foster meritocracy as opposed to, what is regional balance? Kenyans are not going to be satisfied. The life of Kenya is not going to improve because the government is regionally representing everyone. But they are going to be satisfied if they are going to get value from the leadership of the day. So we should look into what can we do to ensure that the president is going to discharge the functions of the presidency to every part of this country, not necessarily inclining towards where he comes from. I mean, if we think along those lines, then we are going to add value. We are going to do a referendum, or rather change the constitution and bring more value to the Kenyan people.
And yet, even as, well, of course, he says that Kenyans are looking towards service delivery, but we know that politics plays a critical role, especially in the organization of the social contract that we have. So what are the prospects, according to you, in ensuring that this organization happens? He talks about this is a BBI, the Building Bridges Initiative, is for two people. How then does such an agenda, such a proposal, how can it be sold to the rest of the country and agree towards moving towards the same direction?
Yeah. Thank you, Sam. The good news is that Kenyans really know that the Building Bridges initiative was a result of what has continually bedeviled the country. And this is really what we are talking about around elections. And in particular, the effort, even as we sought to try and change the constitution, it was this idea where we had a larger-than-life president. I think we remember the times when through the presidential system you would get the chief running into your homestead and really just kind of not allowing Kenyan to have peace or have good governance. And therefore, what I see that is extremely important here for us to remember, and I want to say that indeed I agree with Mheshimiwa that the members of parliament need to bear in mind that they are the representatives of the people. I think it is extremely important that as we are representing the people, we ask ourselves, what was it that sought Kenyans to even get back and say we want to change the constitution? And I think right at the center was the issue of good governance, because we had a situation where in our country it looked like some people were even asking, greet the people in Kenya, sometimes because of the region of northern Kenya, but sometimes because they were seen, quote unquote, to be in opposition. I am a nominated member of ODM, and the ODM party actually was born out of the move to get Kenyans together in a movement to come up with reform, to come up with inclusivity. And therefore, Sam, what I think about the proposals that we are making is that indeed we have to ask ourselves, when we are trying to capture inclusivity of ethnic groups, persons with disability, when we want all Kenyans to feel Kenyan, how can we go about it? And I think here it seems to be leaning on trying to get institutions to work. And there is the idea that if you are going to perhaps get a Senate that will be more effective, reduce the numbers. If you are going to look at the county assemblies,
right.
You would want to try and avoid a situation where you have such a large number that you are not really able to, in a way, come up with a competitive process that is still manageable, that allows people who are going to come in to speak in the interest of the public. And indeed, if you're going to address the perennial challenge of elections every 5 years that seems to take place against institutions that purport to be independent, but which we have seen very, very clearly. I always remember the late Kivutu, who even told us how all of these things were being cooked in a big sufuria, and he was the very man who was supposed to be in charge.
Yes.
And I think we don't have to go back the stories we've seen up to 2017. I would argue that as much as Honorable Richard indicated, and I agree with him, that we need to look at the actual details,
right.
I actually do think it gives us a framework. I think we have a framework to say, let's find ways in which the presidency does not become a matter of life and death. And I think part of limiting the term, but also expanding a little bit, is useful. Moving from a presidential system to a parliamentary system, so you also break the power structures, and you therefore create room for different members or regions, if you like, to fit in. I think it is something worth looking at, and I really would like that we keep asking, what is it that Wanjiko needs?
Professor Odol, you come from the ODM party, and if you look at the story that is just next to the one you're talking about on page 12 of the Standard, there are some MPs who are saying that they'll ensure the deputy president does not win poll in 2022. These are, of course, the party leader of ODM, John Mbadi, CS Senator James Orengo, and they are saying that the Kenyans should start to prepare for a new constitution and a possible Raila presidency. So when you read that and then you see the proposals that are being made to the BBI, the Building Bridges Initiative, you start to wonder, are you making these proposals with selfish interests at heart? And how does the rest of the public and the other parties trust your initiative?
I think this is where we need to be looking at politics and the process of politicking. I think I'm happy to be seated with my senior politicians. I can confirm to you, if you ask them what happens when they pick the microphone and they're on the stage, it really resonates. They respond to the crowd. But when they sit, as we do now, trying to figure out what it is that needs to be done, they become leaders who then are able to look at what it is that is in the country and how we are moving. I would like to urge that as we look at that, we will see that the very reason why they are presented in as different programs is that this is something that is coming out of a political rally. I mean, Honorable John Mbadi could be the chair of the party, but this was really a place where they were. That was not the Orange Democratic Movement. But I think when you look at what you see presented before BBI, that is a structured conversation of the Orange Democratic Movement.
So where do you draw the line?
I think what I want to tell Kenyans is that John Mbadi is the chairman of a party that has lost presidential elections for a decade now, so over 20 years. So it is very easy to, I think it's very easy to make someone win elections than make someone not to win elections. So the fact that he has been unable to assist Baba win the presidency for like now 4 times now, he has no moral authority to say that he has the powers to block Kenyans from voting for any person. Nonetheless, there is something that also, before my senior Onyonga responds or talks about. Kenyans interrogated this constitution very well when it was coming up in 2010. And the reason as to why Kenyans voted for this constitution is because they felt that the presidency has always favored the regions where it comes from in terms of doing development. That's why they stripped the powers of appropriating from the presidency to parliament. So I think the institution that needs reforms is parliament. Because Kenyans will not be blaming the president for not developing this country. Because the powers to appropriate budget and the direct development is in the hands of the National Assembly. What the presidency does, that they will do some proposals, then Parliament will reallocate. Take money from this ministry to this ministry, from this department to this department. So when you see that some parts of this country are not developed, don't blame the president, blame Parliament. Parliament needs to be reformed. Parliament needs to live true to the Constitution, even as we appropriate budget. We just need not to be a conveyor belt of approving, rubber stamping what is brought to us. But if we just go and stick to the core mandate of Parliament, the role of Parliament in budget-making process, then Kenyans will never cry that we have no development.
But how do you do that, bearing in mind that you have had a lot of complaints that the executive is sort of controlling a parliament, bearing in mind that the Jubilee Party has majority, you belong to it. So what reform are you talking about, and how does it get instituted, that institution?
That's why I've said Parliament needs a lot of reforms. I remember very well that my brother is on the budget committee. He came to Bungoma. He was chairing some subcommittee of budget. They went to Bungoma around trying to identify, to getting the views of the people of Bungoma on what should be priority. I don't know, they came up with a report which was adopted. I don't know where the rain begins to beat Parliament. But we get, that is what the problem is. Because
allow me to tell you where the
that is, if we address that, and that the Parliament is going to execute its role without interference, then I will tell you for free that Kenyans will not bother who is the president, do not bother who is the minister, as long as when we are doing budget-making process, people will know that we are going to have this road in Bungoma is going to be tarmacked, we are going to have this road in Nyanza being tarmacked. Nobody will blame president for interfering with such kind of
just before
agenda.
Nyonka, you know where the rain started beating?
Of course. It is because the parliamentarians want to have their cake and eat it. The problem we have with our constitution right now is that the people who are negotiating in Bomas, who are negotiating in Kilifi, in Naivasha, were direct beneficiaries of this constitution. And now that it has come to the fore, for example, now that we have a system where the parliamentarians actually have a lot of responsibility in our national government. What we should be seeing is a situation whereby Parliament is able to operate independently of the executive. But what do we still have? We still have state house lunches. We still have people being whipped. But what we also see is that even within the parties, there's rebellion, such that if you say state house is in control of Parliament, I'm thinking myself, have you not seen the gender bill and the finance bill? Has that not told you that we have reached a situation where the parliamentarians now actually don't care what comes out of state house? In fact, they even dare the president, just call us for a PG. Just call us for a PG.
And you will see.
We will tell you what we have on our mind. But over and above that, even when you talk about changing the constitution, for example, one of the things that parliamentarians ought to be able to release is going back to mashinani to pretend that they're the ones who are doing development. Acheni MCA your kazi. You now have got national responsibilities, controlling 85% of our national budget. If 3/4 of the time, rather than being in Parliament debating things seriously and critically, you're running around in the constituency, it means then things fall through the cracks. If you are still having partisan interests, trying to balance, and that's what I'm saying, if you're going to change the constitution, unless you're going to full mixed member representation, where you're looking at party lists, where you abolish constituencies, just look at party member lists and say, you know what, if these guys go to National Assembly, they're not thinking about mashinani still. They are now focusing on this. That's when you can have a smaller, leaner, more efficient parliament. But what we have now, people want to be heroes in the village, they want to be heroes in the city, they want to be heroes in the party. And so you have a situation where that power play is what the rain that is beating us right now, because you have parliamentarians who are looking at everything through the prism of how will we benefit out of this? How will this make our life easier? And that's a problem.
And yet, Mheshimiwa Onyonka, without this conversation going on, it is the politicians, because ODM is a political party, they're the ones who are making these suggestions, and you can see how they're speaking in readiness for 2022. I'll ask you the same question. How do Kenyans, or how does the rest of the public trust these politicians that they actually have the best interests of the country at heart?
Honestly, today we are really handling so much, but I will try to rush through it. Number one, I have always talked to my friend and my brother, John Badi. ODM as a party needs to be very sensitive what they say, when they say it, and how they say it. What ODM is doing by allowing Badi to make such comments, it means that the Building Bridges initiative is actually tailor-made and is coordinated and is organized for the simple reason that somebody somewhere, whether it is President Uhuru Kenyatta and former Prime Minister Raila himself, trying to reorganize and reconfigure how Raila is going to be president or prime minister, whatever that may come out from this constitutional dispensation that we are talking about. Unfortunately, that is defeatist. These statements that you see Mbadi making and the issues where you've... And what is so interesting, yes, if you look at that story, they are saying there are 3 MPs from the North Rift who have criticized the deputy president over the maize scandal. That cannot be a matter that you then go and discuss publicly and say, now, because of these guys who have made this allegation, let us now figure out how we are going to dump the deputy president and figure out how to get somebody who's maybe presumably cleaner and somebody who's going to do ABCD. My argument is we all need to be more weighted and more careful what we speak from now until we reach the stage where we are actually going to come up with this constitutional new debates and discussions that are taking place. We need to rethink how we message this message, and we need to be careful what we discuss. The other issue that I wanted to raise is this, and you know I love my brother Ditma Barasa. I always tell him he's my upcoming, very brilliant politician. Even in the US, and my sister here, even in America, members of Congress negotiate deals with the president for the areas and the congressional districts where they represent. So let's not imagine that this thing is all about members of parliament. The issue of members of parliament having certain responsibilities in terms of, for example, you look at where we are today as members of parliament, in parliament, this office that we have here. What is it that we are doing as members that is representing the public, that is making the public appreciate the responsibilities and role of a representative, and that is somebody like me? The problem we have is our structure of the old, I want to call it the old constitution, the constitution that promulgated in 2010, actually removed us from playing any major role insofar as we are now supposed to come to parliament, pass bills and laws, and sit around and see whether this is effective or not. And yet when you go to the village, you have an MCA who has a responsibility. We have a governor who has responsibility. Then you bring in a member of parliament who has completely no responsibility. In fact, we have been fighting to make sure that CDF, everybody thinks that we are having for CDF, or we're asking for CDF to be introduced at the village level because we want to take the money. That is not the reason. We are irrelevant without CDF. And this debate that we have started discussing here, we are going to insist that a member, and we are not going to be members of parliament for the next 30 years. No. But we have realized the gap that a member of parliament completely becomes irrelevant. You can imagine me as a member of parliament of Kitutu Church South constituency. Once I go to a facility and realize the toilets are broken, and the next thing the public is asking me, Mheshimiwa, umekuja hapa kufanya nini na choo zetu zimeanguka? Then I have to run to the governor. Your Excellency, you know this school, the toilets are broken. We must be able to be sensitive and understand that, yes, we were dreaming of having this big idea, and these ideals about a parliament that goes and drafts laws and make sure that we bring bills and make sure that we check the executive. That is not our reality. Our reality is a member of parliament must be relevant, an MCA must be relevant. Look at the county development boards, where members of parliament and the senators were supposed to sit with the governor. The governors just walked out and said, we won't listen to that nonsense. Why? Because the governors knew we were going to checkmate what they're doing. But we have no role completely. I can't go and tell the governor, do this for me.
And looking at it, because I would imagine that the framers of the Constitution and how things are supposed to work, as you say, it was well intended.
Yes.
What is making those systems
No, we have
work?
discovered those gaps are the ones that we want to be discussed now. I mean, I know that it is very unpopular to begin discussing the role of the women reps. We must discuss that. Why can't we have the woman rep becoming the deputy to the governor? Why must she go and campaign in 9 constituencies in Kisii as the women rep, spend the same amount of money that the governor and the senator are spending, and then come to parliament where she has got nearly no responsibility? These are things that we must begin to discuss, legitimately or otherwise. And when we bring these issues, then let us not politicize them. Let us make sure that we are engaging ourselves intelligently and reasonably. Let this debate not be about Raila and Gideon Moi and William Ruto. Let the political class in this country realize that there are certain things which the Kenyan public expects us to do to make Kenya a better country for all of us to live in.
And do you think that's a possibility that intelligence and reason is going to take the time, and people are going to reason based on those as they carry on with this agenda?
Kenya is not short of intelligence. That's a problem. Maybe we have too much intelligence, and that's why we keep messing ourselves up like this. Because even when we were proposing, this constitution was proposed, I'm one of those people who campaigned for the no vote to this constitution. And this is one of the reasons why. Because they said, look, when you've got a huge parliament with all these people who are fighting for these meager resources, you are bound to have what Mheshimiwa is talking about now. You've got a lot of, a big name, but the responsibility is not commensurate. And what happens is now, like for example, the gender bill, part of the reason why it seems to be having difficulty is if people imagine we are taking more people to that house to do a lot more nothing, it doesn't seem to be worth it.
Right.
And that's a problem right now where we are, because if we're going to put thought into it, and I like what you're saying, let us not politicize it. Because if we do not politicize it, then we'll have a critical discussion. Because one of the things that I have proposed is let's do away with the constituency. So that if you're getting voted, you're not getting voted from Kitutu. You are being voted as a leader who's coming to do now what the aspirations we have with the parliamentary system right now. But if you want to still go back to the constituency, then this is going to be a perennial problem. Because right now, even the problem with the women rep, even if she wants to initiate projects, in whose constituency are you going to do it? And there you are, as rightly pointed out, you have a county-wide mandate. But you don't have county-wide influence.
Yeah.
So it gets to a place where we are paying people for doing absolutely nothing. And at the end of the day, is the Kenyan who's suffering, because everybody thinks somebody is doing something. In the end, nobody is doing it. And that's a problem.
Yeah, yes, Sam, I kind of noticed there that you were almost forgetting about me. And I thought this is why I need to remind you, part of the reason why the women rep position was there was that sometimes a woman as qualified with a voice like mine can be somehow invisible. I think, I'm telling you, this is really why I'm glad it happened, because you see, it can happen. And maybe once you think about the women rep, let's sometimes not gloss over, let's also look at the culture and the practices. What I wanted to indicate here, which I think for me is extremely important, that we can sit grand and say, let's not politicize. But in Kenya, everything is politicized. And I would like to start by saying, as an experience from government, because now I sit in parliament, doing oversight. And when I sit there, I sometimes wonder, so what exactly is going on here? Part of the reason we see all this politicizing, and which we really need to understand, is the complexity that we face as we deal with building bridges and we think about the politicizing, not just of ODM, but actually of all of us politicians and political parties, is that if we take the example, for example, of just roads, infrastructure, I think you could look at any document and you'd see that from the perspective of policy, there are very clear ways in which we were supposed to be moving. When you check right now, you might find that the deputy president, as he goes around the country, you would see that there is a skew. So the politicization of implementation has been institutionalized. Right. And I think the conversation that we are holding here, I'd like to call on Kenyans, let's not forget, why did we need to have Building Bridges initiative? It is because, contrary to the presentation of the Constitution 2010, where we were going to very clearly indicate this is going to be Parliament with the roles that we've had, that will be coming up with legislation, will be engaging in oversight. This is going to be the executive, which is going to be implementing. This is going to be the judiciary. We watched, even as we looked at the electoral injustice, even as we looked at the challenges, that we got to a point where our institutions were not working. The people are waiting for us to deliver. The structures are in place. The institution can work, but they are not working because they are being politicized. So I really just want us, as we look at this issue here, to also remember that as representatives of the people, we owe it to ourselves, even from within Parliament, for example. We owe it to ourselves to ask, fine, this is what it is that Parliament indicates, and I'm glad that even as we're looking at ensuring that the Parliamentary Service Commission also becomes a commission similar in legality and position like the one of Public Service and Judiciary, but we then ask ourselves, in terms of how we organize and engage, are we truly engaging in the level of oversight that will hold? And I want to say, Sam, one of my proudest moments was last week as we debated on the Public Accounts Committee. And I particularly liked the manner in which Parliament was able to clearly just point out to the executive, particularly CSs and other officers, that really there's some of these things that you are doing which we are not going to accept. So I think really as we look at this debate right now, I personally would like to call upon Kenyans. Can we get to campaigns which are issue-based? I think we might blame Honorable Badi and Orengo, but I think I've also seen Honorable Didmas, you know, go at it a little bit. The kind of way we campaign, we do not deal with issues. We go there, we get Kenyans confused, we chant, we make calls, and then we sit back and say we should not politicize. I think we all need to do a serious introspect.
And I think that's a very good point.
No, Sam.
I actually want to proceed on a break and then we come back with more. Of course, you're watching Daybreak on Citizen TV with Richard Onyonka, Professor Jacqueline Odol, Jem Divo, and Didmas Baraza. You can tweet us your views, your questions on at Citizen TV Kenya, at Sam Gituku, at Willis Rabur. The hashtag to use is Daybreak, and also you can text us on 22422. When we return, we'll be talking about what they have actually been talking about, the politicization of issues, and looking at what the politicians have been saying, of course, from the weekend events that they held. But stay tuned to Citizen TV. We're back in a moment.